In our modern age, the rate at which technology is developing and changing and the speed of new technologies emerging is enough to make your head spin. But one aspect of that perhaps doesn't get as much attention as it should is the ethics and the moral component of these new technologies. Are we thinking about how best to use these things for our businesses? Are we thinking about the right way from a moral perspective to use, for example, ChatGPT? To help me answer that question, or maybe just ask more questions, my guest today is an AI ethicist. Her name is Olivia Gambelin, and her company, Ethical Intelligence, offers ethics as a service to help businesses understand, consider, plan for the ethical implications of their emerging technologies and their innovations. So we're going to be talking all about that, all about the work that she does, and of course, the implications for leadership as well. So it's going to be an interesting one for anyone who's curious about technology, AI, the future, and what that might mean for us as humans. This is Leading with Integrity, Leadership Talk, the podcast for first-time managers who are working in tech-driven businesses and teams and who want to be more effective, people-first leaders. Each week, you will learn the crucial strategies, mindsets, and practical tips that successful modern leaders follow to be engaging, ethical, and authentic managers who get the best from their teams. And we'll achieve all of this via weekly conversations with leaders, with leadership experts, entrepreneurs, and business owners, people who have already walked this path and have some amazing insights to share, with an added sprinkling of occasional solo episodes and some group chats where we'll have multiple guests. My name is David Hatch, and I will be your host. And leadership has always been a passion for me. After a career spent in a series of small businesses during 15 years in the aerospace industry, 5 or 6 of those at the end of that career were in a space startup in the UK, so trying to launch satellites into orbit, very cool stuff. And through all of that experience, I learned that the secret to successful management is in the ability to apply great leadership. And in turn, the secret to great leadership, it's all about your integrity, putting people before profits.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Olivia, thank you very much for joining me today. Really looking forward to talking about all things AI and ethics and wherever the two shall meet.
Thank you for having me here today, David.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to have you. So I think the best place to start is perhaps if you introduce yourself to the listeners, tell us a bit about your background, what you do, how you've ended up doing what you do, and why you love it or don't. I assume you do, but
let's hope that I love it. Yeah, exactly. It'd be kind of funky to get on a podcast and be like, let me tell you about this terrible job.
Yeah, that would be a bit awkward for me as well, I suppose.
To give you an understanding, so I wear 2 different hats. I wear the hat of an ethicist and an entrepreneur. I'll talk more about the ethicist side, but there's also that entrepreneur side. But essentially, I am an AI ethicist. What that means is I'm a practicing ethicist in the field of emerging technology, not just artificial intelligence. You'll hear people say I'm an AI ethicist. That's the title that I use, but really I'll work on all emerging technology. I like to joke that AI ethics just sounds fancier than tech ethicist, so that's what we go by. But my focus in my work around AI ethics is really focused on working with executives and leadership on understanding the impact of our technology on society. So beyond just the bottom line, let's say, and actually using ethics and values both to safeguard substantial risks that come with using artificial intelligence, for example, but also looking at how to use ethics for innovation, how to design for our values. And my specialty is actually focusing on that innovation side from a strategic and operational perspective. The entrepreneur hat, the other part of my work is I'm the founder of Ethical Intelligence. We are an AI ethics advisory firm, and Ethical Intelligence hosts the world's largest network of verified professionals in responsible and ethical AI, which is a really fascinating group of people. They all come from different shapes and sizes of backgrounds. And it's always quite interesting to work with them because we're working alongside policymakers and lawmakers and technologists and psychologists sometimes. And so it covers the whole gauntlet. I really love my work, so I don't hate my job. So we don't have that awkward question. I really love my work. Good. Exactly. Ethics for me is kind of like a science. It's very fascinating to me to understand how the world works, not necessarily from a physical or governmental standpoint, but more of how we as humans interact with each other and what we expect of each other. So ethics to me is really quite fascinating, and being able to apply it to the space of artificial intelligence. We're building our technology in our image. Our technology is a reflection of our humanity. And so having the chance to actually apply ethics in that situation allows us to also have the reflection back towards who we as people want to grow to be. So it's really quite a fascinating field for me.
It does sound like I guess it's groundbreaking, isn't it? With all of these emerging technologies, and innovation by its nature is things that are new or new ways of doing old things. Can you tell us a bit more then about what an ethicist does on a day-to-day basis, really?
Yeah. So an ethicist is kind of like, think like part translator, part therapist at times. At least that's kind of what the job feels like on some days. When I'm saying translator, it means I work between silos within a company. So I have to be versed in how to speak with engineers and data scientists, but also at the same time speak with executives and leadership, sometimes board of directors, as well as the marketing team, as well as the legal team. These are challenges that are best tackled holistically within a company. So my translating sits between these different departments, different disciplines, being able to connect the dots that otherwise are quite separated. I'm also working as a translator, little air quotes there, by taking these high-level abstract values and bringing them down into practical action, and vice versa, being able to look at a specific contextual situation and abstract out to understand what values are at work and at play, and the best decision to make in that situation. The therapist side, I have to say, comes more from just working with people. A lot of times I have clients come to me and they say, I'm afraid. And that's kind of their first statement of I'm scared. And when you engage with an ethicist, think of it as like working with kind of that same working relationship that you have with a coach or an advisor, where you sit down and you're trying to use them as a sounding board to understand what is the decision that I should be making in this situation. An ethicist works in that same way. We're there to support decisions. We're decision support. We're coming with information. We have the skill set to work through specific frameworks and concepts and ideologies quite quickly. We're able to spot these difficult decisions that need to be made on more efficiently. But really what we're there to do is to help you think through what decisions should I be making in this scenario that's best possible outcome for all stakeholders involved.
And it must be quite difficult. I guess there's an element of being almost a futurist, isn't there, to kind of predict, and maybe not predict, but guess, I suppose, what the ethical, moral implications might be of a certain new technology. I mean, the classic one is it's going to put people out of work, and that's the one that a lot of people, maybe these days it's more common to think of that, but back 100 years ago that might not have occurred to someone. So I mean, how do you help people get into that frame of mind to think about those possibilities and then take the appropriate decision?
Yeah, so it's a bit of twofold. So on one side, we have had enough case studies and research and really real life examples that we're able to extrapolate off of to be able to understand some basics. So when we're looking at new technology, if that new technology is based off of current data sets, I immediately can understand, okay, here's what we need to start asking in terms of what in that data set will end up in those models. Doesn't matter what those models are. I'm looking at the data set and I have plenty of examples to go through there. So cases like that, having a robust understanding of what are common current pitfalls, understanding how those translate into the new technology, if those translate into the new technology, where the limitations of that are. But then when it comes to kind of predicting the future, let's say, or looking forward, there's this concept actually called moral imagination, and it's quite important. And it's something that we as ethicists are, I would say, inadvertently trained on. But essentially what it is, moral imagination, is being able to look at a decision and think about what could the possible outcomes be. And so you're thinking through multiple different outcomes, and you're thinking, okay, what is the likelihood of this scenario happening? It's probably this, or like, if I make this decision, what could possibly be the knock-on effects and the outcomes that come out of it. And so you're really flexing that imagination muscle, because you're right. We can't fully predict, but I think there's the difference between being able to predict the future versus being able to look at our current understanding and catch some pretty basic stuff that we've all come to understand that probably won't work well. And then also in the scenarios that we can't predict, having robust strategies for response in place. So if something goes wrong that we weren't able to predict, what are the immediate action plans? So how do we mitigate the damage that's now happening, and how do we ensure that doesn't happen again? So having those in place as well.
The law of unintended consequences and all of that sort of thing, yeah.
Yes.
And going back to your therapy angle as well, how long do you think it'll be before ChatGPT needs therapy?
Oh, we probably need it now. Honestly, it's I can only imagine the bizarre questions it's gotten to date. I have a friend that's been cracking me up. He's finishing his PhD, and he's a non-native English speaker. And so he's using ChatGPT to actually help correct some grammatical errors, which is really kind of cool. But he cracks me up because he will take like a paragraph of his thesis, he'll put it in, and he'll say, "Dear ChatGPT, would you please review this section of my doctoral thesis? Thanks," and signs off. And so he has established he does it as a joke, but he's like, "I'm establishing a good relationship. So when ChatGPT takes over, it'll remember that I was very nice to it." So maybe there's a few other people like him out there, actually not abusing it.
It's funny you should mention that. I've spoken to a data scientist or two who are exactly the same. They're like, one day when the machines take over, I want them to remember I was nice to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a funny one. Yeah. On the subject of AI again, then, what do you think are the biggest ethical challenges that we're facing right now with the current iterations of, depending on who you talk to, it's a stretch to call it AI in inverted commas, but machine learning, let's say.
Yeah. I would say there's a handful of larger issues that are appearing. So looking specifically on a technical level, fairness has been a constant question. So understanding what is bias, what isn't what is unwanted bias versus what is just naturally within the system that you're not going to change. You can't ever fully eliminate bias. It's more understanding what is the bias that needs to be eliminated, the unwanted. There's a lot of challenges around that because the questions around fairness, you actually have to start in what defining fairness is in a certain context, and then being able to understand the nuances within the data that will hopefully echo that definition of fairness, and put in the proper controls. So I would say anything around the question of making a system fair is still an ongoing process, despite the amount of effort being put behind it. But the interesting thing is it's less of a technical problem and more of a societal problem of being able to understand what is fair for the majority of a group, because something will always be unfair to someone. And being able to get around that concept, that understanding, that bridge. So I'd say fairness is definitely one of them. I would say another challenge ethically is around our concept of privacy and value around our data. So we started our technology on this understanding that data was there to take and use. And now, as we've grown in the past, let's say 20 years, we've come to understand, well, data is something that is a person. It originates from a person, and there needs to be that respect and value given back to the person. You can't just take data and not expect to have any repercussions off of that. So I think a larger ethical challenge around our use of data and what is the right balance to strike between this is too much information, you are invading someone's privacy, versus this is a public good that we can use and benefit more people. So there are a lot of questions around that aspect. And I know these aren't details around specific applications, but one of the challenges as an ethicist is to get people to ask specific questions, because they'll ask, like, what should I be worried about generative AI? And you're like, where do I start? There's a lot of questions. Which actually leads into another ethical challenge, let's say around deepfakes and communication right now. That one is probably the one I'm most concerned about, just because there's this lack of trust and understanding and clarity. So we're going into an age where people are sitting there going, I have no idea if what I'm looking at is true or not. And that's really going to have a lot of impact on societal levels. To kind of boil this down, though, these challenges are focused on the technology and the application of the technology. Something I want to stress, though, is the most common roots of these ethical challenges are actually in the people and the process that's built in the technology. So within companies, are the people trained on ethics and the concept of these values? Is there the proper governance and systems in place and incentives in place that will allow the people to building the technology to do so in an ethical way? That's actually more of the root causes. Like 9 times out of 10, I'd say that's the root cause of ethical challenges, rather than it being in the technology. So just wanted to stress that as well.
It's very interesting, actually, particularly the fairness, and you mentioned bias a lot. And I mean, any system, it doesn't matter how perfect, is only ever going to be as good as the information that's put into it. So if you're feeding it biased data, if you're only feeding it one side of the story, and then
you're just going to get one side of the story. Exactly.
Exactly. So it must be extremely difficult to consciously cater for that as well. When you think about unconscious biases as well, and cultural differences, and even at like a fundamental level, you're going to have a bias between levels of wealth and equity versus poverty. So somebody who can't afford a computer is never going to be able to input their data, and therefore they're not going to be represented, for example. Yeah. I don't envy you that one. That must be quite a struggle.
It's definitely an ongoing question. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you apply AI in your own business or other technologies even? What's your process for your own company?
We always laugh when it comes time to actually incorporate a new technology, because we spend time with, especially, let's say, digital transformation teams or corporate strategy teams, looking at how to incorporate technology, how to incorporate emerging technology into your business. So we call it like our meta ethics sessions, where we're actually looking at how to use technology to help us understand how to use technology. And there's multiple levels. So to be honest, we actually don't typically engage in using any type of AI on our research. We prefer to keep it much more human-centric. We have, though, actually started using generative AI in a few instances. We do play around. We use Notion as our central system for the company, and Notion released something called Notion AI, which does a really great job, actually, of summarizing meeting notes, and the ability to actually extrapolate different takeaways. So we have a rule, though. You have to read what any generative AI system you've asked, you have to read and fact check, and ensure, okay, If it's something that is original thought or research, then that has to be written by you. You can use any type of generative AI or in our case, Notion, to be able to give you ideas, but you have to add on top of that. So we have some strict rules around it. We do use image generation. Again, the rule with that is whenever we're using image generation, we actually list the prompt and what system we've used to create that image to ensure there's no confusion of this is a generated image. That's just an example of current emerging technology. Like I said, we tend to refrain from using any type of AI systems on our research and on our methodologies, only because it's still so new that we need to have such a nuanced layer of attention that if we were starting to use systems now, if we had any type of error in our logic or in our moral reasoning, that's now stuck. So we're still not at the stage where we're able to build off of that yet. It's quite a responsibility to be able to make that step. So we take it very seriously. Let's put it that way.
Another interesting one that you mentioned there with the image generation. So I guess with ChatGPT and things like that, where you're putting in tons and tons of data and text, and I guess you could apply it to creative writing if you wanted to, but I imagine it would be quite maybe not a boring story, but formulaic, I imagine. I'm going to try that now and see what comes out. But for the artwork side of it, which side of the fence do you sit on when it comes to the artists and the people whose work are being used potentially without their permission to generate new original content, and they're getting no royalties, they're getting no mention, they're getting no acknowledgements for that? So
along with that, I've actually spoken to a lot of artists on either end of the spectrum, because for me, I was thinking, well, I will dabble in art here and there, but it's not my profession. My livelihood, my well-being does not depend on my art. So I spoke with people that it does to understand, what is your perspective on this? And from both sides of the spectrum. So I've spoken with artists that actually incorporate generative AI into their own artistic process. And that for me becomes quite interesting, because it's a conversation between the artist and, think of it as like a giant summarization tool of a reflection of how society views, I don't know, if you ask it, like, give me an image of an apple. That image that it produces of that apple is the combination of thousands upon thousands of images that it's run across that we as humans have produced. So there's a chance there for quite an interesting conversation with artists and generative AI. On the other end of the spectrum, I have spoken with artists that are afraid and terrified because they put all of this time and effort into creating their style and developing it, and now someone can just take it and reproduce it in 2 seconds. There's a difference between someone that takes the time and effort to manually figure out how to do it versus just being able to feed into a system. I'm on the side of the fence that really should be controlled, that people should not have the ability to just say, make me a picture in the style of, I don't know, Ansel Adams, let's say, out of respect for the artist, really out of respect for the artist, because the artist at the end of the day does put hours and hours of thought and time and energy and emotion into understanding their style. It's something that they've developed. It's not a commodity to take and reproduce at scale. The limited capacity of it is what gives it that value, and that human touch is what gives it that value. That's my opinion, though. So yeah, I guess I would sit on the side of the fence of protecting, being more protective of artists rather than not.
Yeah, I think I'm probably on the same side of the fence as you, actually, especially when it's something where it's an artist who has an established style and you're just typing in, do it in the style of that artist. Like that to me feels a bit like stealing. It's copyright theft, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think where the line is for me is once you're over the point of repetitive manual tasks. I think that's where it becomes okay. If it is just generic picture of an apple, but I need 100 variations, something like that. For whatever reason, I don't know why you'd want 100 pictures of apples, but
who knows? we'll ask that question later.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Good. I'm glad we're on the same side of the fence anyway.
Yeah.
From a business owner's perspective, what's the best advice you can offer a business owner who is worried about an emerging technology, whatever it may be, and how they could best use it, how they could use it in the right way, get them the most from it, but do that in a morally right way? Yeah.
So I would say ask the question from the very start. When you were considering the technology, using the tech, first of all, consider to use it, whether or not it actually is helpful for you. You don't have to use emerging technology. You don't have to use generative AI. Since I guess right now, emerging technology and generative AI are synonyms, or people are using it as synonyms. So I'll speak generative AI. Ask yourself if it's useful for you. Like, really, truly understand, what do you need out of this task? I've heard, for example, generative AI described almost perfectly as a mediocre consultant. Like, what it puts out is very formulaic. We've seen the formula. It's pretty standard. There's not really that layer of creativity in there. If you're needing that for any type of reflection. So understanding, is this a scenario where you really just need a quick summary, a formulaic summary? Perfect. Done. Then, generative AI could work for you. And I'm speaking about a very narrow use case of generative AI as well. I realize there's many applications of it. But ask yourself truly, what is the purpose that I'm trying to reach with this task? Can I help? Can generative AI help me achieve that purpose? Or is it going to be a distraction? Am I going to be creating more work for myself? So, for example, people were using it, I know, to help write research papers. Problem is, anything around generative AI or ChatGPT, it's not factual. So you're creating more work for yourself to actually have to go through what it's written and try and figure out, is this true or not? So I would say, sorry, I'm coming back around now. As a business owner, understand the purpose that you are, or the task that you are trying to automate with an emerging technology. Understand if you really actually need that technology or not. And then on top of that, in that moment, ask yourself, what is the bigger question here? Looking at, if I were to use this technology in this instance, what impact is it going to bring, not to me, but to my end users? You are obviously looking at it for a reason of, will this make my work more efficient or effective? But put yourself in the shoes of your end users and those around your end users, and understand, is this actually going to benefit them? Or is this going to be in any way type of manipulative or harmful? That should give you some good idea of whether or not you should be using the technology.
Yeah, I guess the major attraction, particularly for a small business owner, maybe someone who's by themselves in the business like I am, it's time. It saves you time.
Absolutely.
Particularly I haven't used it that much. I've experimented with it. It's very early days for me. But particularly if you're trying to do something where it takes a lot of brain power and you don't have the time to just do it manually every single time. There's things like that. But then it also reminds me, particularly at the end of what you were saying there, the old cliche of, if something is free, it means you're the product. So think about all the data that you're putting in there and whether you want that to go in there for the algorithm or who knows who else to look at it.
Exactly.
Not to sound too paranoid.
But it's something that people forget, honestly, that they, with these free systems, they are feeding those models. What are you feeding into that model? It's important to understand that and remember it.
Which I suppose is why they're not factual, because if anyone can put anything in there.
Yes, and it's also so the models themselves, they're built in a way that, and I always have to stress this for people. It's large language models. That's what ChatGPT is. It's built to predict the likelihood of the next word, not in context of the sentence, not in context of the information. It's just looking at how likely is the next word to be this. Like, if you're saying the strawberry is, it's predicting likelihood of that next word. It's going to be 99% red. Okay, that's the next word. So it's really not actually looking at fact in any of those sentences. It's just taking a combination of millions and millions of data points on sentence structure and basically like word combinations, and relationships and relations. So really fascinating from that perspective, but also very limited in being able to understand it. Or it is not factual. It is not creative. It is predicting the next word. That's it.
And on the subject of biases and your data being the product, even if you think it's free, and fairness and factualness and all of those kind of things, I recently watched the Cambridge Analytica documentary on Netflix.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one. It's very good, listeners. If you've not watched it yet, I recommend it. How much of that is true, though, do you think? Was it really as bad as they made it out? I mean, it's hard to tell with Netflix documentaries as well sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I know there's always that hype around, let's make this scarier, make it but I think the scary thing is the facts there are true. And it's scary that we have the ability of people had the ability in that time and place to be able to work on something like the Cambridge Analytica scandal and not have an understanding or not have the either understanding of the bigger picture, so being siloed from the full picture information, or if they had the full picture information, not having the courage to say, hold on, this is not good, this is not working. We need to think beyond just something cool that we can do. So yeah, it's I'd say as well, there was another documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix that was very, I'll put it, fear-mongering. So in one way, it's not as scary as it's presented. Netflix is definitely adding the drama. But at the same time, these are facts that are important to pay attention to and can be very scary. But remember, there are people out there working on it to hopefully contradict and counteract these instances. So it is scary, but it's not hopeless. Let's put it that way.
I think it's good to end on an optimistic note with that subject.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we go very dark.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's not dwell on that one anymore. What is the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
Okay. The biggest lesson, and I'd say the hardest one for me, understanding that it is okay to show weakness as a leader and ask for help from people, not only within my network, but also from my team, to be able to say to my team, look, I am having a hard week, or I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm trying to figure it out. Being able to show weakness is a lot. It's a bigger strength than I realized. There was a long time that I spent focused on, I have to always be strong. I have to always have the answer in this scenario. And all it did was just trap me in my own box and fear constantly of, I need to know all the answers and I need to know everything. And this pressure that I was putting on myself. But when I learn, and I still haven't fully learned the lesson, I always default back towards, I need to be strong. But how I've learned to actually have moments of that vulnerability and show the weakness, I'm always surprised about what comes back. I'm always surprised about the support that comes from my team, or the creativity that comes from my team, or within my network, the encouragement and advice and support that comes from being able to say, look, I'm struggling right now and I do need help. That's been the hardest lesson for me to learn, hands down.
Yeah, I can certainly empathise with that one. I think it's a sign of the changing times to an extent as well, isn't it? 'Cause I'm not sure about you, but certainly when I started my career, any sign of weakness was a cause for loss of respect.
Yeah.
Not just as a leader, just generally in the workplace.
Yeah.
That has changed now. It's the opposite now. If you're not willing to be a little bit vulnerable and authentic, is the buzzword, isn't it? And be more honest about yourself, your life outside work as well, and how you're feeling about something. If you're stressed, if you're on a bad week, all that kind of thing. Actually, it builds trust. It builds respect. People feel trusted as well because you're sharing something with them. And I think it's the expectation now, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very interesting change, isn't it, that trend?
Yeah. It's a good one, I think.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No disagreement here. What has been your own best experience of being led?
So I have to say I'm a person that really enjoys a challenge. And so the moments where I had the best leadership was when I had a leader, or a supervisor or a mentor that noticed in me, maybe not a fully developed skill, but a skill that I had the capacity to develop, and then give me a challenge, something that I could very likely fail at. And then just leave it to me to figure out. That's actually been the best points where I've been able to grow, and be that kind of leadership for me. It's a bit of a hands-off approach, I understand. But the hands-off, let me put a challenge to you so you can rise to the occasion, for me has always been the best support, I have to say. The best way that I've been able to grow in my own abilities. I want to think of a concrete example here. I wish I had a story come to mind right away. It's been a while since I've been leading a team and focused in the opposite direction. So I feel like it's hard to think back in the other way. But yeah, I'd have to say I like hands-off challenges because it makes me feel like I'm being led in a way that the person trusts me to have the ability to do it. And then I inadvertently have trust in myself of, this person believes I can do it. I don't have any idea how I'm going to do this, but I must be able to find it somewhere in me. So I'm going to try.
It depends on the individuals, doesn't it? But I think there's got to be that underlying level of support as well. I think it's, you can't just sort of be pushed in at the deep end and left to it. Being able to make the mistake, being free to make mistakes and therefore learn. Yeah. And not feeling like you're going to get a ton of bricks dropped on you for doing that or making a mistake. But at the same time, knowing that if you do get stuck, you've still got the support to go and say, I need help. Yeah. Interesting. It's a shame you can't name anyone. That would have been good. But
I'm running through, and the problem is I keep having ideas of or I keep having memories of lots of little moments here and there with different people. So I was trying to pull them together. Here's the general summary.
I think there's a lesson in that itself as well. It's not always about the grand sweeping gestures or the big speeches, is it? It's real leadership is in those small moments that make a difference to someone's day or week or hopefully life. Exactly. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest mistake that a leader can make?
Assuming that, I know I just said, to give a challenge and then have someone go and poke around in it. I think one of the biggest mistakes is assuming that the person you are trying to lead has all the information they need to be able to execute. I've noticed both in times where I have been in a scenario where I wish there had been better leadership for me to follow, or as well as moments where I have fallen short as a leader, where I've assumed that the person I have given a project to or an objective, I've assumed that they understand what's going on in my head, or that they have all the information that they need, and then been frustrated coming back and saying, like, what in the world is this? If I wanted something very specific. So being able to strike the balance between having very clear set structured objectives and information that will help the person execute or myself execute, but giving enough space in between to be able to understand and experiment how to reach those steps and milestones. So always assuming that the person doesn't have the information that they need. So you need to be communicative about your objectives, about your wants, desires, but also the way of going about execution, let's say.
Yes, it can be a fine line to walk, can't it, between letting someone get on with the job and not interfering and making sure they know enough to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's one of the big struggles, I think, of leadership and management. Actually, I think it's where a lot of people get really badly stuck on one extreme or the other. They're either constantly domineering and micromanaging, or they're just not interested and never check in.
Yeah.
It's a big one. Definitely.
And it depends person to person too. Some people need a lot of information. Other people, you're like, are you sure you're okay? You got it? Yeah, totally fine.
Yeah, definitely. So it's our flexibility, isn't it? And being able to cater differently to different individuals.
Yes, exactly.
All of which comes down to knowing your people.
Yep. At the end of the day, it's all about the humans.
Indeed. If you had the opportunity to start your business over again from scratch, would you do anything differently?
I would do a lot differently, I think. I mean, let me put it this way. If I were to start a different company today, I would do things a lot differently. I am very grateful for the baptism by fire hose that my current company has been in terms of understanding how to be a leader. Lessons that I would take from that experience would actually be really truly in focusing on people, understanding their character, and I would say learning as a leader that it is not my job to protect people. It is my job to enable people. I started off the company really trying to protect the people that were working with me, protect them from AI ethics is a great space to work in, but it can be very, very difficult. And so I was always constantly trying to protect people from negative comments or problems with business. Cause startup, there's always something wrong. Trying to protect people from problems and challenges and make it cushy, make sure that they were taken care of. That doesn't work. It's too much in an extreme. You do need to make sure that people are taken care of, but it is counterproductive for me to make sacrifices that are too much for sacrifices on my own self that are too much for me to handle in exchange for protecting someone else. I need to be able to trust that the other person can handle risk and can handle challenges. And so that being said, I think there are a lot of changes I would make in terms of how I manage people, but also who I would choose to manage, who I would choose for my team with that understanding. I look for, can you handle risk? Can you handle pressure? Not too much, not the crazy amount that you see in movies or startup or rumors around tech startups. But can you take responsibility and can you take ownership, and will you shoulder this risk alongside? Yeah,
that's an interesting one. And I think context again plays a part there, because in a startup environment, as the business owner, I think it's a very different proposition to if you were, say, a mid-level manager in a large corporate. I think at that point, it's very much about protecting people.
Yes. Yeah, this is true. Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I should put a little asterisk before I start talking of like, I run a small team. This is a startup, this perspective I'm speaking from.
Yeah, but I think even in the way you've explained it, there is still that element in there of looking after people. Let's drop the word protecting, but it's a similar theme, isn't it? It's like
being able to understand what's the difference between taking care, looking after people, and protecting them, because you can look after someone by, I don't know why I've got like a medieval war scene in my mind as a metaphor, but we'll go with it. Looking after someone's making sure, they've got a shield and a sword and they're trained, they can go in and fight, versus you actually using your body as a shield for that would be protecting someone. So there we go. There's my medieval metaphor.
Yeah, no, it's a good analogy. I like it. And I think where it makes the most sense to me is, it might be a noble thing to try and do that, but the bigger your team, the more impossible that becomes. Because you would be running all over the battlefield all the time, wouldn't you?
Oh my goodness, you'd have so many stab wounds too. That wouldn't go well.
You wouldn't last very long. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, so maybe it's a good metaphor in the end.
Yeah, I like it. Good.
Leadership Heroes.
All right. Well, I've only got one question left, and it's my favourite question. It's called Leadership Heroes. And the question is, if you had to pick a person, one person, anyone you like, they can be alive or dead, past, present, maybe medieval, given our previous question, real or fictitious, if you like, as well, who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. Who would that person be and why?
Okay, so I know there's many different types of leadership. And so I'll add that little preference of there's many different types of leadership, and I think I would give a different answer depending on the context I was thinking through. And so right now, since I'm thinking through work and business and being a leader within the workplace, I actually want to say my aunt, which I know is kind of funny, but my aunt, Papia, she is the perfect embodiment of what I think you would call authentic leadership. She runs, I know I should know her title better, but she basically runs policy for the entire West Coast region of United Airlines. So she manages a lot of people. She is the first one on the line for whenever there's some problem with the airlines, or like with coronavirus, different masks and counties dropping different rules and everything. She's right on the front line. She has stress, or she's probably in one of those stressful positions that you can be. But she has become this leader where she's so authentically herself. She shows up in whatever outfit she feels like. It's always very professional, but it's whatever outfit. And she's got a very, she calls it ghetto style, but she's gotten to the point where she's like, this is who I am. I take care of my homies. That's literally what she calls it. It's her homie rule. And she leads by lifting other people up without any, expectation that there will be a return. She's like, I see that I can create this opportunity for you. I'm going to do it. I don't expect a return. Well, I think she expects a thank you, but that's it. But I don't expect a return. I want you to do well. And so she looks out she calls them her homies. She looks out for her homies, and it doesn't matter what level you're at, doesn't matter if you are early stage career, doesn't matter if you're board of directors of a whatever company. She treats everyone the same. She treats everyone with that same level of respect. And it is very much, I will create this opportunity for you, or I will support you in this moment because of you as a person. You deserve this as a person. No strings, no nothing. And I've watched as she has built up this amazing career where she is highly respected by everyone around her because she first has that authenticity where she swears, she wears crazy clothes, and everyone she's memorable. But at the same time, everyone has a huge respect for her because they know that when you deal with Papia, she's going to put you first. You will be taken care of, and in a way that it's not fake. She's not looking. She doesn't have an ulterior motive. And yeah, I think I really love her leadership style that she's built up, and I have a huge amount of respect for it. So I would say my aunt.
I had a few family member ones before, and they're always good, but it's usually a parent or a sibling. So it's nice to have a different branch of the family.
Yes, exactly. Branches going to different parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And authentic leadership sounds right. A little bit of servant leadership in there as well, I think.
Yeah, kind of a combination. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Sounds amazing. Yeah.
Yes. She is. She's awesome.
Yeah. I haven't met her, so I can't comment on any further on that one. But yeah, great choice. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time. I'm definitely out of questions. So the only thing I have really at the end is if the listeners want to learn a bit more about you, what you do, how AI ethics works, or just ethics generally, really. Do you want to point them towards a website or a book?
So you can check out my website, oliviagambelin.com. That covers all of my talks. I'm a pretty avid public speaker. You can actually check out my TEDx talk, which it's titled How Ethics Will Change the Future of Technology. If you're interested in ethics, I also have a couple of research pieces, and potentially a book coming soon. We're going to knock on wood on that one. We'll see, but check out the website. Everything's there. If you're interested more actually in AI ethics and how that all works, from basically an ethics as a service standpoint, check out the company website. It's ethicalintelligence.co, not .com. And we have a lot of different resources. We produce a journal called The Equation quarterly. Our last issue was on the ethics of generative AI. So we've got a lot of great resources there, especially if you want to dig in.
Excellent. Well, I'll certainly be taking another look at a lot of that myself.
Yes.
It's been a really great conversation, Olivia. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing everything that you do. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me, David. And it's been fun being able to talk about leadership.
I'm pleased to hear it. Excellent. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Olivia.
You as well.
Olivia, thank you again. That was great. Really enjoyed that conversation. Could have spent another hour at least talking about Cambridge Analytica, or whinging about it, I should say, really. But there we go. Listeners, if you would like to learn more about Olivia or her company, Ethical Intelligence, and the idea of moral imagination or ethics as a service, I have put Olivia's website address in the episode description, so you can find that easily and reach out to her. I'm sure she would love to have a conversation with you. And if you are a first-time manager, if you're working in a tech-driven business or team, and you want to be a more effective people-first leader, then I have a program for you. To find out more, visit the website. It's www.leadernotaboss.com. And failing that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, you'll find the link to all of this in the episode description. Drop me a message. Let me know what you're looking for, or perhaps the challenge you're facing as a leader manager right now, and we'll have a chat and see if I can help. No obligation, just always happy to chat leadership and help if I can. That's all I've got time for today. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next week. And in the meantime, remember, be a leader, not a boss.